who is here together? Yeah, probably it's time. We can start. Yes, I have information that the live stream is already done. Okay, more than welcome. Good morning, everybody, all participants on our international conference about the norm of subjectivity in missiological reflection. It is yesterday. It was wonderful day of our reflection on this problem. In general, we're talking about human being, about human personalism, and here today we have great guest from Tanzania, from Morogoro Jordan University, UCO, how we say UCO University, who we have very good collaboration as Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. And most than welcome first Father Octavian Hiniu, who will talk about philotheological analysis of the concept of a person in African Bantu communities. And Father Octavian, are you here? Father Octavian? Probably he's not here. Father Victor, do you know something about Father Octavian? No, I don't hear you. Please check your microphone. Your microphone, Father Victor, is not working. No, it's not working. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
No, now it's okay. Now it's okay. Father?
We are waiting for you.
Oh.
We are waiting for you, Father. Yes. You just join. If there is a possibility of joining, you can just join.
Yeah, just simple join.
Yeah.
Joining us. If we have problem with the connection of Father Octavian, we can start by Father Victor, maybe, no? Because are you here? Father Victor Bieramata, because it's no problem who is the first, who is the second. We put here on the program Father Octavian as the first, but it's no problem if he will be the second. Father Victor, are you ready? No, I don't hear. Please use your microphone.
Are you hearing me?
Father Victor?
Yes.
Okay, Father Victor. Father Victor, perspective of person in the documents of the African Church. Please start your presentation, and Father Octavian will be the first one. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, good morning, good morning.
Morning,
yes,
morning.
Yes, the title that I am going to present is the perspective of a person in the documents of the Church, of the African Church. And I have decided to consult three documents. Particularly, one is based in the African document written by the Episcopal of Amesea. Amesea is the association of the member of Episcopal conferences in East African. And then I will consult the document of Ecclesia in Africa, and then the Africa Munus. So, and then lastly, shortly, I will talk, which is not directly about Africa, but it has some notions which are similar to this document of the Fratelli Tutti of the Pope Francis. Now, by beginning of defining the term as appear in the document, the term person is defined in terms which is very common to many Africans, which is Ubuntu. There is a term that we use, Ubuntu, describes a person or an individual like a human being who is in another human being. So is never identified a human being or a person alone without other persons. And even though the documents of the post-synodal apostolic exhortations, Ecclesia in Africa, and Africa Munus, which I've already mentioned, do not refer directly to the term Ubuntu, but reading their explanations, they are coming closer to this meaning of Ubuntu, which define a person in relationship with others. So the concept of the person that has been emerged from this document is that a person cannot be defined outside of the community. Is always departing from the community is where they can reach to a person. So there is no, the concept of a person as a subject individual standing alone without referring to other persons or other people. That's why you will find that these documents, they are talking and they are emphasizing much on the concept of communion, the community or the family. These are very strong terms that are to define the person: family, communion, or community. For instance, the document of Amesea does have the title entitled Basic Human Communication. This article or writing explains that in African culture, a person is recognized as a human being when he or she is in the community. And I quote, "We are human when we are in the touch with other people. In fact, it is our being in touch with others that makes us human and opens the possibilities of developing our humanity." You can see that here, they are not mentioning a person particular, but they are using the term human, and this human is in another humanity. Likewise, there is another quotation that they are trying to make difference between of the understanding of how the church understand the person, that the starting point is the community. And I quote, "Communication is basic to the African experience in every special way. In the Western world, people are brought up and encouraged to be individual first and foremost. But in Africa, we are members of a community in communication with one another, first and foremost." The end of quotations. From this quotation, it appears very clearly in the document of the AMESEA that the understanding a person and his personality as an open human being, intrinsically rooted in the community. The document categorically states that the concept of a person as it appears in the world of the human beings between Western and the African world is different. The African church understands the human person in the humans of others. It is like the same. If you go to see the article which was published by Sister Jacinta Antonetta Okoth in the same document of AMESEA, it is in the website, was commenting on the sentence of or the call of Pope Francis when he said that to speak from the heart needs the culture of Ubuntu, which is in African culture. The African culture of Ubuntu unites the persons to feel like one man. It is also appears in the African philosophy, where they say that the Ubuntu discourages individualism and supports collectivism. That is the understanding of the AMESEA and the articles which have quoted, written by these two writers. One is Jacinta, and was quoting also Father Abagnese CVD. So from that first document, we can see it is very clearly, it is referring to a person not as an individual, but a person who is never alone, but a person or a human being when he's in an others. And they are taking the saying of one from the Botswana. It is written in the original language, motho ke motho ka batho, underlining the meaning that you have already mentioned before. So by coming to the end of the first document of AMESEA, it is seen clearly that there is really a connectivity. There is a relatedness between being person with others. So in that concept, it is very clear that the concept of you, of the person, is relational, is extensional, is more and more broad than that we think as an individual. Now, coming to the document written by Pope John II in 1995, is a post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Ecclesia in Africa. I have seen that when he's writing, is quoting using the parallel terms. He's using human person. In most of the cases has used that term. Never person alone, but is adding before human person. It is like he wants to emphasize and to respect the African culture, as I have said before, that this document is saying, and I quote, "The Africans, in bracket, respect the life which is conceived and born. Africans show their respect for human life until its natural end, and keep elderly parents and relatives within the family." Here, Pope was emphasizing the value of a family, seeing that the respect of a family reflects the meaning of being a person. And in respect of this tradition, this value, if you read, for instance, this document number 127 is saying that for that reason, for this meaning of understanding of communion of life, Christ in the members of his body is himself African. You can see how the document has emphasized the being a human being a person in Africa, that even taking the example of Jesus himself, who is collecting people to himself to become one family, to share communion, as we see during our gathering, that concept of communion is reflected in the African culture itself, to the extent that he's saying that Jesus himself is African for that concept. So the document recognizes the concept of a person in such a way. And I quote the document itself. It says, "In Africa culture and tradition, the role of the family is everywhere held to be fundamental, open to this sense of the family, of love and respect for life. The African loves children who are joyfully welcomed as gift of God. The sons and daughters of Africa love life. It is precisely this love for life that leads them to give such great importance to the veneration of their ancestors. They believe intuitively that the dead continue to live and remain in communion with them." So the document is at the underlining that communionship of the persons, to the extent also to the dead. They are mentioning here the ancestors, this document, and it's very strong in Africa that the communion of life is not only of the one person, of an individual, but life itself is like a shadow, is like an umbrella that everyone participate, even for the dead. They continue to be part of those who are still in this world. It is like similar that we see in the saints. So the document is recognizing that value and is exerting it. Also, I will quote another part of the document which says, "African culture have an acute sense of solidarity and community life. In Africa, it is unthinkable to celebrate a feast without the participation of the whole village. Indeed, community life in Africa societies expresses the extended family. It is my ardent hope and prayer that Africa will always preserve this priceless cultural heritage and never succumb to the temptation to individualism, which is so alien to its best tradition." So this was the document written by Pope John II, explaining the concept of being a human being in Africa. Another document that I've quoted and consulted in explaining the concept of the being person is Africae Munus, written in 2011 by Benedict XXVI. And this document also is using the term human person. His Holiness Pope Benedict 2016 places the life of person in the Africa context of the community extended to the ancestor, like what John Paul II did. The Pope speaks of the special characteristics of the African concept of person, identified through the communion of life in the context of unions, also with the ancestors, as I quote him, "the great openness of heart and the spirit." So the concept of a person in this document is that openness openness that accommodates the communionship. Now, I would like to underline something that is very special in this document. It identifies that the solidarity and the gathering that are symbolized in the coming together is not a simple organization, but it defines what the real person is. If we look at that spirit that the document has quoted, is saying that the communion is extended even to the deceased. The document states that in the African worldview, life is perceived as something that embraces and includes ancestors, the living and those yet to be born, the whole of creation and all beings, those that speak and those that are mute, those that think and those lacking thought. The visible and invisible universe is regarded as a living space for human beings, but also as a space for communion where past generations invisibly flank present generations, themselves the mothers of future generations. This great openness of heart, that is very important, openness of heart and the spirit in the African tradition predisposes it means Africans, he was talking to the bishops, to receive Christ's message, to appreciate the mystery of church, and thus to value human life to the full, along with the conditions in which it is lived with. So you can see that three documents, they are talking about person, but never person as alone, a person with others. And also, maybe I can go back a bit to the Amesea to emphasize what Pope Benedict has written. And it says that I will connect this concept that even the concept of creation itself, it means to meet the persons. This document is saying that even the concept of creation itself, the creation means the meeting of the persons. This is how the document has defined and understand the meaning of creation. Now, like as I go to conclude my presentation, as I have said, I have also read the document of Fratelli Tutti. Actually, this document is not about the African understanding of person, but there is some concepts and explanations which are very similar to the idea that we are talking about. And also, this document was quoted by the African reader who connected the idea of Francis with the concept of Ubuntu, which I have already explained before. I will quote the document itself. It says, this is the Pope who was talking to the youth. You are the tree, you are the roots. Therefore, the stronger you are, the stronger your roots are. But we don't want your roots to be individual. We want you to be united so that your roots can turn into a tree, which in turn can bear fruit. And this is reflecting the saying of the Pope Francis, where he say, each of us is fully a person when we are part of a people. But he says that there are no people without respect for the individuality of each person. So my dear colleague who are listening to me, I am about to conclude my presentation. by saying that this is what I have noticed in the documents which are talking about a human being, trying to define him. And for what I can say lastly is that in the perspective that we have seen, it is very clear that the documents underlines that the term person is likely to be understood as human being, endowed with the quality of relationship as a person. And the term which is similar is the Ubuntu, is the appropriate term used in African culture to understand a relational individual. In African semantic, Ubuntu is a person, human person through other persons. A person or human cannot be defined as a single being with reference to the community. Theologically, Ubuntu means a person in other persons, human, a human in the whole community. Here, other persons should mean the essence of the human being. The documents have shown the African person as someone whose essence is openness to other, community, communion, and life. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Father Victor, for a wonderful presentation. And here, can you see what I have in my hands here? Amacea, July 2022. I was one of participants of this conference, of this meetings of the bishops.
Sure.
I was also guest of your president, a lady who gave us wonderful lunch or something like that. Yes, I have a lot of pictures from these wonderful meetings. Thank you very much for mention John Paul II, because as you know, we hear a good connection between Tanzania and Poland, and to remember us these three documents. Thank you very much. And now we're going to Father Octavian. Father Octavian, are you here?
Yes, I am here, Father.
Thank you very much. It's your time, Father, about 20-25 minutes.
Okay, in the first place, I would wish in the first place to tender my apology. I had some internet complications, but I am now ready to share.
No problem. It's okay.
Okay, greetings, cordial greetings to all of you. I am ready now to present a philosophical, theological, historical analysis of the concept of a person in African Bantu communities. I have divided my presentation into four categories with introduction and conclusion. In the introductory remarks, it states that the fact of having employed the term person renders a thorough explanation of its dignity. The concept enjoys rich respite of philosophical, theological, history, etymology, and value. To comprehend it sufficiently, it is worthy to cross-examine the context within which it came into application and the historical evaluation through which it passed. It is the task of this paper, therefore, to present a philosophical, theological, historical analysis of the concept, as I have said. In the first part, we are looking at a synopsis of the concept of person. The concept person is a multifaceted term. That is the reason why the paper, therefore, at the very beginning, endeavors to show that the concept of a person is one of the keys for grasping the overall vision of a human being in Africa. Person in African philosophical theological thought is tied to more than mere existence, because in a general term, when you talk of a person in an African context, it will always lead someone into understanding the whole existence of a person. But in other words, merely being a living human that exists is not a sufficient condition for a person. One must exhibit personhood in others to be called a person. This lines with what the celebrated African philosopher, the late Professor John Samuel Mbiti, would put it in his book, African Tradition and Religion. He's saying, I am because we are. Since we are, therefore I am. This lines also with Martin Heidegger's existentialistic idea, being in the Zen, or being in the crowd. This is what Professor John Mbiti is also trying to present, that I am because we are. Because we are, therefore I am. The idea here is attaining personhood can invariably lead into a meaningful life. The origin of the concept now in an African perspective. In African Bantu communities, the concept is considered from its demeanor in the cradle of Western philosophy, namely ancient Greek. That is where we can derive the origin of this concept of person in Africa. But academically, the overshadowing verdict remains that the term person as such was absent in Africa. Maybe I would wish to insist here. Academically, the overshadowing verdict remains that the term person as such was absent in Africa. The absence of the technical formulation of the concept, however, should not mistakenly entail the complete absence of the notion it represents. Though technically we cannot point that this is what stands to represent the concept of person in African academic realm, but this should not mistakenly remove what the concept person represents or entails. It should also not necessarily be matched by a lack of some mental understanding of a given reality, however rudimentary that understanding may happen to be. It suffices to remember that despite the absence of the term person, there existed an awareness of the prerogatives which constitute the particular ontological entity of a person, of a personal existence. Thus, in concrete life, Africans, though lacking the term, nevertheless expressed their unique estimation of the value of man's life in a very special way, in which they handled him in contrast to all other existence, revealing thereof the awareness of a special dignity and ennobling finality accruing to him. Despite the absence of a definite rendering for the term person, the fact remains that in the African setting, the analysis of the origin of the term person has been closely bound up with the notion of existence. So in Africa, in a nutshell, what we can say, existence means the person, and vice versa is true. So what is the historical breakthrough of the term? Unless for Greek and Egyptian mythologies, the concept of person in Africa has for centuries been a hard nut to untie, meaning that it's very difficult to a mere African sage philosopher to give you a critical, analytical explanation of what the term person stands for. It had to wait until Marcel Grial's 1948 important work, Dieu do avec Ogotemel, the book which was trying to looking at some African-based, especially Western Sudan Bantu tribes. He's saying that he believed that they were characterized by specific knowledge attributed to God known as Alma. So you see now, later on we will come into the concept that Africans are religious in nature and character. That's why for them to understand something, apart from appealing into other authorities, their first authority to appeal is God. That's why Marcel will refer into the God of these Bantu Sudanic tribes, that the God Alma is the source of all, or is the source of all that exists. He's saying, from the Alma, the one God who was not supposed to be taken for granted, all other knowledge emerged. So even the knowledge of the concept of a person emerges from this God. The person in this context, Muntu. My brother Victor had mentioned Ubuntu, meaning the person. When you go into South African tribes, categorically speaking Zulu, they are referring the concept person as Muntu, meaning the person. So in African context, Muntu was envisaged in the perspective of Alma, the God. Departing from the actual sense of the concept person, the temptation is for someone to overlook the long underlying history. Evidently, the good number of scholars have fallen into a prey to this trap. A careful examination of works in which the concept person plays a key role reveals a tendency to forego its foundation. Probably such a lacuna is the effect of assuming that the term person is sufficiently known. Even though how defensive we are going to be, but the truth remains that the term person in an African context is insufficient, cannot stand on its own and give the intended meaning both in philosophical and theological field. So what now is our point of departure? The point of departure here is this, that both anthropology and philosophy shares questions about how the concept of the person is defined and used in social interaction. These disciplines take rather different approaches to answers they provide. Both are concerned with the distinguishing between the continuity over time that enables agents to characterize an individual as a person, and with epistemological problem posed by the differences between social attribution and self-knowledge. So what does the philosophy now tells us about the concept of a person? Philosophy will tell you this, that whatever may be the case in respect to wish for unity, it is at the beginning and at the end of truth that the reactivation of African texts, the reversal of perspectives in history, bears witness to an epistemological transformation. Knowledge about the concept of person now orders itself in accordance with a new look. Despite the resilience of primitives and evolution myth, a new discourse, more exactly, a new type of relation to the African object of knowledge has been established. Anthropology and anthropology now as the most compromised discipline. So by the use of philosophical concepts and knowledge now, the concept of a person can only be understood in an anthropological viewpoint. That is love, in a humanistic perspective. This is what philosophy is telling us, that it appears to me that African Bantu communities have been trying to understand the concept of person only in the context of existence, that he who exists is the person. This is the silent and a priori choice of the truth of the concept person, which aims at a given context. In this case now, I should like to reveal this astounding truth to you. Not only I, a relational creature, not only does a mind paradoxically inhabit this human body, but I come from a distant planet. This is what African philosophers will try to tell you. As I conclude my presentation, allow me to conclude with some theological understanding of some theological African understanding of the hypothesis. Towards a theological elaboration of the concept person in African Bantu communities, there is a striking analogy between the etymological circumstances related to the term person and the whereabouts of its contextual elaboration. In the former, the mythological and cultic aspects were determinant. What do we mean by mythological and cultic aspects? We mean that by mythological and cultic, we refer into an existence of not only a person, whatever exists has its as Placide Temple, one of the notable African philosophers, Belgium-based, but Belgium by origin, but worked in Africa for so long. He's using the concept of vital force, meaning that there is a certain force which is powerful than all other sources. So in Africa, for us to understand something, we must attribute it into that force which is powerful than ourselves. The theological undertakings of the early church played a decisive role. By the early church here now, we mean of the missionaries who came to evangelize in Africa and imparted knowledge of God. Africans, as I said a while ago, are religious by nature and character. In Africa, whatever occurrence or event will be associated as God's doings. In the biographical basis, therefore, the concept person is attributed to God. Among Bantus, person represents the human being who is little lower than God, who is, as how Immanuel Kant in his Critique of Pure Reason will tell us, the highest good, the summum bonum. In the conclusion, this is what I would say, that following the sequence that formed the background of the study, one cannot but recognize the limits involved. The most apparent lacuna hangs around the concept person, given that the definition of person applies to God. One evident objection is, how can God be envisaged as a person? This is the question, of course, we all can reflect. How can God be considered to represent the concept person which we are referring to? Although one of the questions which has still to be tackled is an illustration how the concept person could be applicable to God. The concept person cannot simply be attributed to God, since in the traditional thinking, it accrues to the accidentals, which cannot conform to the directly nature of God. God transcends all other created realities, which in them clear depiction of God's omnipresence is manifested. So thank you very much, dear friends. That is what I had.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Father Octavian. And
Yes.
we appreciate a lot your presentation because, as you know, our time is not according to human person as you see, as you understood, as Africa can share with us, with Europe, with America, etc. This really health understanding of human person, in also in philosophical and theological understanding. Thank you very much. And now we're going to Father Caninua Muelva, a Salvatorian, yeah?
Yes,
Coming
Yes,
from
he is.
Salvatorian community.
yes, I am
Thank you very
Salvatorian.
much. Thank you very much. And all of you, dear brothers and sister, because in the end will be the sister, it is a very big pleasure for me and for all of us to see you face to face, no, because we know you by internet, by our administration systems, etc., etc. But here is a good occasion, good meeting to meet you by internet in this distance, but it's no problem. Now we're going to person in pastoral work in Africa. Okay, very, very interesting and very needed topic. It's your time, Father.
Thank you very much to my colleague. To my colleagues, I can say good afternoon. And to you in Poland, maybe good morning.
Of course, good morning, good morning. Yeah.
So, first of all, small thing, a point of correction about my title. After consulting books, I come up and I arrange the title as follows: Person in Pastoral Work in African Culture. Because I find it a little bit rich in order to share something new in our way of doing our pastoral work. So, Pope Benedict XVI, in his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Africa Monos, what is going on here? Africa Monos fosters Africans to the important values, above all, to a pastor on his pastoral ground as follows: to care for the human person who is naturally and religiously called to a metanoia, an authentic conversion, to experiencing the truths of the sacrament of penance and reconciliation, to a spirituality of communion, to the inculturation of the gospel and the evangelization of culture. This is the gift of Christ for Africa. So this is also the way that the Africans can feel as a human being at work of evangelization. So these ideas of the Pope are very important in our pastoral work in Africa. That's why my work is subdivided in two parts. The first one, I will talk about cultural reality in Africa. And the second one will be the pastoral person at work in Africa, in African reality. Of course, since we are treating African reality in pastoral work, we shall use the right terminology accessible to the African reality. So, Africa, first of all, is a continent with many religious values beside cultures. Culture is one of the meaningful religious values in Africa. This is the common term that defines the work of the community. And by talking about the community, we see the framework of meaning of a person. I will jump something because my fellow brothers have touched this way of living, especially Father Victor. He has mentioned that in Africa, a person is not alone. The concept of person is a community. So this is one of the richness of Africa. So for this reason, it is relevant that the pastoral agent identify themselves with the culture in their pastoral work. To preach the gospel is to enculturate the gospel so that the work of a person can be seen in its reality. Then comes the need for enculturation, for it helps to integrate the agent of the gospel and the milieu or environment. This indicates that the pastoral activity of the church is very important with the involving of the person as he is, together with his whole community. That's why also Laurent Magesa proposed that the definition mentioned included the process of rooting Christianity into a culture, celebrating liturgy in an African way, integrating also cultural elements into Christian worship, evangelizing Africa in African way, immersing the Christian faith in the local culture that make a person to feel at work because he's aware of what is going on in his work. So, fitna stresses, culture and religion revitalize society. The goal of enculturation, therefore, is a single cultural entity that is at once a culture transformed by faith, and a faith that is culturally re-expressed. For this, we have the result of enculturation with a sentence of Pope John Paul II, who said that faith becomes culture. So work becomes culture. Pastoral work becomes culture. But at least by mentioning that, we are sure that the work of a pastor in Africa is to live in the African culture, in which one digs out the values which will conform to the reality of the gospel. This is very high, for instance, in my country, in DRC, in Congo. You can feel that even the way of celebrating the liturgy, it is culturally accepted already. And people feel in presence of God, I mean, they feel well when they use their own words, when they use their own possibility of praying and glorifying God. That's why I'm saying that this cannot be neglected. The culture remain, or the enculturation of the gospel remain very important in the pastoral work, because we can refer to the parable of the Good Shepherd. And this is John chapter 10. The Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, takes care of his flock and even his life for his sheep, each of whom he knows by name. As Lamont says, refers to the parable of the Good Shepherd. He said that pastoral is the art of living together about Jesus Christ. As for Fitchner, he thinks that work is first the way of unionized between God and man, creator and co-creator. So there is no work without the creator. Man becomes actually as a co-creator. Pastoral work involves various activities in the church to accomplish the mission received from Jesus. The whole mission of the church is pastoral, but this mission is carried out by men and in different realities. As for me, I am talking about the African reality. African reality goes for cultural reality. It is important to discern whether we are still on the line of Jesus. Yes, this reflection is the task of pastoral theology, knowing that pastoral theology is the body that reflects on the church action to see if it is still authentic or a reflection on the church action. As a person at pastoral work in the reality of Africa must respond to the need of his flock by letting himself drown in the culture. The work of pastor in Africa is to follow the objectives of the church to ensure that the three important offices of Jesus Christ are successfully inculturated in the pastoral work. Jesus is prophet, is priest, and king. In other words, Christ is well seen in his three functions: prophetic function, priestly function, and royal function. The interrelationship between the pastoral agents, here, this interrelationship, I'm talking about pastor and flock, is relevant since it discloses the nature of human being as an understandable and religious person. The flock, these are Christians, need a lot from the pastor. The work of the pastor must be for the sake of his flock. The cultural synthesis where theology is to find the nourishment as to be carried out in him. The theologian has the duty to be the religious conscience of Africa and reminding Africa of what accounted for its grandeur, its religious faith, says Fitchner. The theologian must therefore listen to all the perspectives on reality in the continent before proclaiming this to all the perspective, before proclaiming it by word and action. Differently, put, the theologian in a religious pluralistic society must respect the otherness. We are working together as other and as we. This makes the work as the work of God. So the second part is about a person at pastoral work. After knowing a little bit the reality of Africans, let's now see a person at work in African reality. Naturally, a person refers to a human being. Fitchner thinks that biblical man is defined by his relationships. Before any other relationships, man is constituted a person before God. The Christian story assumes that human beings and personhood reflect a prior reality to work. And this prior reality is under control of God, who blessed the work. That's why the pastor thinks to render service when he does it in the name of God. And these missions of the proclamation of the word with strict African responsibility, the pastor achieves his mission by being responsible for the gospel, including the culture. Therefore, the proclamation of the word of God requires faithfulness in both parts, pastor and flock. The word of God must touch the pastor and his listeners in their African reality. In Christian reality, God has spoken once and for all time, but still the actualization of the word in human reality is relevant. And this is the work of a pastor. And it is the pastor who actualize the word of God in this time. African Christians accept pastor who gives the good example, which means preaching must be rebound of the word in the pastor. And this service is accepted as a good work for the flock. So because the pastor has a special mission weighted by everybody, the mission of the pastor and Christian in Africa is nothing more to experience Jesus. Each pastor agent, pastor and Christian, is part of the response to the pastoral work. The success of pastoral work is the assumption of both parts. No one has the right to defeat another. Rather, putting the notion of perfection remains the basic motivation. One needs perfection to access a belonging, actually belonging to Christ, the good pastor, good shepherd. Beside the above, in Africa, a pastoral person is supposed to respond to the needs of his flock. That is why a pastor, a priest in Africa is considered as a medical doctor, as a wise man, elder who has the wisdom. A pastor in the reality of Africa is also considered as a lawyer and so forth. A pastor in the reality to respond to all flock's issues. Furthermore, enculturation for the new Christian arose as an indirect but natural consequence of loving their faith in Jesus of Nazareth, who accepted as the Messiah, the Christ, God's unique and final agent of salvation for all people of the human race. So let me conclude saying that the pastoral work in Africa is a cultural reality. The mission of preaching the gospel cannot go without being enculturated in the African reality. It is therefore necessary to work in order to include the cultural richness of Africa in the pastoral work, namely African ways of living, adoring, and praying, and the African togetherness in pastoral work in the all attention put on the good correlation with the gospel. The reality of pastoral work in Africa remains a challenge, since there is, in some cases, a mixture of religion and ancestors matter. But effort is always made by the pastor or the priest to purify bad ideals for the benefit of the gospel in the reality of African culture. So, having said that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Father Kaninwa. Thank you very much for
Kaninwa
Sorry.
Mwelwa.
Yeah, it's time to understand better your name and surname. Thank you very much to remember us that evangelization of Africa in African way, and this is the essence of the matter, how to understand better African context of understanding of things. Thank you very thank you very much for your wonderful presentation also. And now we have time for Sister Sofina, sister, no? Sister Sofina Masonda, also from
Yes.
Jordan University College. The notion of personhood in African culture. And sister, more than welcome here at this conference. We only to remember us that this is international conference about the norm of subjectivity in missiological reflection. In 2 days, we're doing this reflection about person, human person, about today in African context. We have also someone from Africa who is attending us, who is missionary. For example, Father Michał Tomaszewski, Father Adam Masłowski, and maybe we'll have time to join them in the end of our presentations. After Sister Sofina, maybe someone will have some reflection, some observation, or some questions to our request from Jordan University College. Okay, now it's time for Father Sofina, from Sister Sofina.
Okay, thank you for my colleagues in Tanzania. Good afternoon. And those who are far away, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
My name is Safina, Sister Safina, as I have mentioned, not Sofina, Safina. So you are most welcome to attend this presentation, which is called The Notion of Personhood Within African Culture. So this talk has been gleaned from studies by 3 main scholars. The first one is Pope John Paul II in his encyclical called the Evangelium Vitae on the value and the sacredness of human life, which was given on 25th March 1995. The second scholar is John Mbiti in the Book of African Religions and Philosophy, written in 1969. And another one is Bujo Benezet in the Book of Foundation of African Ethics, written in 2003. However, some references are supplemented from some other books and articles as well. The first point, we are going to see the value of man. In the encyclical of Evangelium Vitae, Pope John Paul II teaches on the sharing of the very life of God, which calls man to a richness of life that far surpasses the confines of his earthly existence, where I have quoted as he says, "Even in difficulties and uncertainties, every person is sincerely open to truth and goodness. By the light of reason and the hidden action of grace, comes to recognize in the natural law written in the heart, as we read in Romans chapter 2, verse 14 to 15. The sacred value of human life from its very beginning until its end, and can affirm the right of every human being to have this primary good respected to the highest degree. In the encyclical also, the Pope teaches that every person is entrusted to the maternal care of the church, namely because of the mystery of the Word of God, who became flesh, as we read, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father full of grace and truth. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14. The enormous rise and seriousness of threats to people's lives, particularly in areas where life is weak and defenseless, make this proclamation particularly urgent today. Apart from the long-standing evil of poverty, Pope John Paul II affirms that whatever insult human dignity, such as subhuman living conditions, arbitrary imprisonment, deportation, slavery, prostitution, the selling of women and children, as well as disgraced working conditions, where people are treated as a mere instrument of gain rather than as free and responsible persons. All these things and other like them are infamous indeed. They poison human society and they do more harm to those who practice them than to those who suffer from the injury. Moreover, they are supreme dishonor to the Creator. The film of quotation. The above quotation is the accord with the philosophical perspective that is the word personhood refer to the uniqueness of people, their individuality, and their sense of stability as exceptional. Therefore, because of what the human person is, his nature, it follows as strictly necessary that he be treated with absolute respect according to his incommensurable value, his dignity. Hence, the teaching is a call to review the notion of personhood in African cultural context. So the other point is only the meaning of the word personhood according to African culture. Personhood to the African, as others has already narrated, especially Father Victor, is laid on the quality of virtuous life, such as right, dignity, and respect that benefit a human person. In this way, personhood seeks to establish the sanctuary of the human person. A person is a social being who is characterized by emotions, knowledge, and intelligence, just as some animals. Other animals may be trained and partial some human duties, but they can't be human. When a person manifests the behavior of animals, they may be considered less human. It may be said of such that they have no heart, or may be reduced to impersonal labor or objects. Among the Swahili-speaking people, defines Utu or personhood or Ubuntu, as Father Victor has mentioned, or personhood to mean being human, or what constitutes the essential nature of the human person. A person with such attributes will partial dignity, practice compassion, seek harmony, have respect for all, and be tolerant, patient, caring, and loving. He or she will place others before him or her and have an interest in the welfare and the preservation of individuals and the community at large. Such an individual will seek integrity. All these values are learned in the family and reflect the type of family and community one has been brought up. In African thought, A person is considered as a combination of the mind, body, and heart. The concept of human nature in Africa can be stated that man is a communal being. John Mbiti puts more clearly that only in terms of other people does the individual become conscious of his being, his duties, his privilege, and his responsibilities towards himself and other people. When one suffers, he does not suffer alone, but with the cooperative group. When he rejoices not alone, but with his kinsmen, his neighbors and relatives, whether they are dead or alive. So, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am, is the only thing the person is capable of saying. Africans have the concept of Ubuntu, as others have been narrated, which means being human. So we believe a person is a person through other person, when means my humanity is caught up, bound up in the other. Consequently, when I dehumanize you, I certainly dehumanize myself. The solitary individual is a contradiction in terms and a normal in African cultural context. Therefore, you seek to work for the common good because your humanity comes into its community in belonging. Another point, let's see the personhood in African society. Some philosophers define a personhood as an adult who works hard, think wisely, and can support a married household in addition to fulfilling a variety of responsibilities to his extended family community. A person in this meaning would exclude social misfits, the demented, the newborns. Therefore, African society is communal since people are thought to be in social relationship with others, both alive and the dead, at all times, and are unable to survive outside of society. In my tribe, it is called Hehe. When one is so alone, lonely, nobody can help him or her, they commit suicide. It is better to die than losing the community life. Kwame Gyeke emphasizes that personhood is to have the fundamental qualities of reason, the ability to be virtuous, the ability to assess and make moral decisions, and consequently, the ability to make decisions. These qualities are found and fostered by society, not created by it. This communal normative conception of person has a certain implication, as Kwame indicates them, including that the human person does not voluntarily choose to enter into a human community. That is, the community life is not optional for an individual. That the human being is simultaneously a cultural being. That the human being cannot live in isolation from other people. And that the human being is inherently directed towards other people and needs to have relationship with them. Consequently, communal values are highly valued in African communities. African societies result in a feeling of community that defines social interaction between individual members of the society. The social relationship between individual members of African societies are characterized by a sense of community that has been established by their communal system. According to Benezet Bujo, the individual may not follow group mindlessly. Being a part of a community requires being vigilant and maintaining one's individuality. John Beatty acknowledged the communal dimension of African way of life as he says, in traditional life, the individual does not and cannot exist alone except cooperatively. He owes this existence to other people. The community must therefore make, create, or produce individual, for the individual depends on the cooperative group. Whatever happens to individual happens to the whole group. And whatever happens to the whole group happens to the individual. The individual can only say, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. This is the cardinal point in the understanding of the African view of man. If any Menkiki asks that, is the community that defines personhood? Personhood does not exist in equalities or of high education or being rich or being smart, etc. But a personhood exists individual recognized by the society. The communal society structures of African society is another point, that the social relationship between individual members of the society are characterized by a sense of community that has been established by the communal structure of African societies. African social life is characterized by a persistent sense of community. In the society, a person cannot exist without a community. In this way, a personhood can be more or less variable throughout time. It makes sense that someone who behaves carelessly would not be a person. For example, here in Tanzania, people like Hehe tribe, they use some of the following phrase to describe someone who is doing wrong, saying, you behave like a dog. In the Lili language, we call it as wita wimbwa or uosi unuha, which means you don't behave like a human being. This only indicates that the individual during the period of his misbehavior is not acting in a manner that is socially acceptable for human, and as a result is a non-person normatively in terms of constituent parts of a person. Because in the gospel, Jesus called Herod as a fox when he wanted to kill him in Jerusalem, as the text narrates that he replied, go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I will reach my goal. Luke 13, verse 32. I would like to conclude through the words of Pope John Paul II, who stressed that when the sense of God is lost, there is also a tendency to lose the sense of man, and his dignity and his life in turn, the systematic violation of the moral law, especially in the serious matter of respect for human life and its dignity, produces a kind of progressive darkening of capacity to discern God's living and saving presence. People are called to respect one another because we are created in the likeness and the image of God. Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27, and Psalm chapter 9, 8, verse 4 to 6, which says, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands and put everything under their feet. From this point of view, people in African culture must understand that being a person means having strong moral claim against others. And then in Africa, it is unthinkable to celebrate a feast or funeral without the participation of the whole village. To maintain this solidarity for today, there is a need for in-depth study of African traditional and culture. Thank you for your attention and listening.
Thank you very much, Sister Safina. Sister
Yes.
Safina, yeah, now is correct, yeah. Safina, yeah, thank you for this presentation and humanization us. I can say humanization, it is key word of your presentation. It's very, very, very important for us to understand better how to be better a human being, a human person of today, because it is not easy, especially in Europe, to understand who is a human person. Thank you very much, sister, again. And all of you, if we have questions, and thank you very much, all of you, for respecting the speaking time, because usually the conference like this, it is the respecting of time is very difficult to to understand. But here today it is wonderful. We have a wonderful time. We have 15 minutes for eventually observations or questions if we have questions. As I said before, we have some missionaries from Africa, like Father Michał, Father Zdzisław also, and also we have Father Wojciech Kluj, who is our director and also vice dean. He will be in during the next part of this conference, chairman. And yes, if we have a question.
Yes, just
Yes, please. Yes, please. Father Victor, okay.
Yes, since we are looking at the term person, and I thank everyone who has participated and contributed much to this conference. Now, I would like to connect the concept to which Father Hinge was presented, that in the African culture, really, there was no term person as it is, like we are discussing it now. Now, what could be the implication when we say person, the term like it is, and when we add human person, as we have seen in some documents and also in our language that we are using, before mentioning person in the term itself like it is, we say human person. So what could be the real difference behind when you say person and human person? Can be like some differences in that?
Yes, please.
Is it clear?
Yeah.
The question is clear. are you posing it to me or to the entire
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 yes.
collegiality? So if I may attempt, because I don't have answers, I'm giving my attempts. I was listening with interest from what my senior elder brother, Father Victor, was presenting his work. The concept of person from documents of the church in Africa. I was so much interested with the Africe Munus and Ecclesia in Africa by Pope Benedict the 16th and John Paul II, respectively. If we are to begin with the philosophical perspective, I will stand with Aristotle's definition of a person that is a rational being. A person is a rational being. A person, to me, the way how I've understood, is a psychic being, a person with rationality who can generate data and choose one among the best, choosing one among the best. This is the person, that existential person. And when you come now into the term as it has been used, because when you talk of John Paul II, the Ecclesia Africa, and the Africe Munus of Benedict the 16th, I tend to think they are presenting their ideas in a more theological way. If they are presenting in a more theological way, then a human person may not. Human person is the first of all existing being, but mostly attributing each and everything to God, a spiritual being. What I can say, because when you come into philosophers, someone, for instance, if you read the understanding of a person according to Boethius, even to St. Bonaventure, the way how they are presenting the human person as a natural being. A philosopher will understand a person without an appeal to divine authority. But a human person, as it has been used by these two great figures of the church, they're attributing it directly to God. So that is what I would wish to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe another questions or observations? No questions, no observation. Okay. If no, thank you very much. Oh, yes, Father Michał. Okay.
Just appreciation from Philippines. So it's nice to hear the perspective from Africa. And yes, so yesterday was more on Asia, so I'm very glad that today we had some voices from Africa. Especially I'm here working now currently with the international formation for us SPDs. And just recently we have some guys from Madagascar, Zimbabwe, and Ghana coming for studies here in the Philippines. So it's nice to hear about and I am one of the formators. So it's nice to hear the perspective from Africa about the human person. Thank you very much for all the presenters.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As we can see, we are really international and intercontinental. we have also today we have 12 attendance, but of course this conference is registered, and we will share and all of interesting who will be interesting in this context. And thank you very much for all voices, and only to remember us that we have scientific committee of this conference from Father Professor Kunicki from Nanzan University, Father Dominika Żukowska, who is from our university, Kardynał Stanisław Wyszyński University, and also We have a professor from University of Silesia in Poland and from Poznań, Adam Mickiewicz University, and Father Jacek Górka from Jordan University is part of a scientific committee, Jordan University College, and committee organizative committee, Professor Jarek Różański, Wojciech Kluj, Tomasz Szyszka, Dominika Puszczyńska, and Marcin Gołąbek, everyone from our university. Only to remember us. And thank you very much for this part of our conference. Here I conclude, and we have break until 11:45. That means we have time for coffee or maybe, I don't know, lunch. For lunch is not enough time. But because in Tanzania now it's time for lunch probably, but here in Poland we have time for coffee, and we will take coffee now. And if more than welcome everybody for the last part of this conference at 11:45. My greeting to all Jordan University College in Morogoro in Tanzania, especially for Father Jacek and for everybody. And thank you very much really for your presence, to be together with us, Father Octavian, Father Victor, Father Kaniwa, and Sister Safina. And I hope that I mentioned more or less good pronunciation of your names. Thank you very, very, very much, and see you again. Thank you.